He saw a pregnant black woman sitting in first class and decided she didn't belong. He thought his platinum credit card and his expensive Italian suit gave him the right to put his hands on her. He thought he was untouchable. But Preston Sterling made one fatal mistake at 30,000 feet. He didn't check who he was kicking. When that leather wallet slid across the aisle and flipped open, the entire cabin went dead silent. 3 letters flashed under the cabin lights. FBI. Watch closely, because what happens to this arrogant billionaire isn't just justice. It's total destruction. This is the story of how one kick cost a man his entire life. The rain at JFK International Airport was relentless, hammering against the floor-to-ceiling glass of Terminal 4. It was a grey, miserable Tuesday morning, the kind of weather that made travel delays inevitable and tempers short. Nia Brooks shifted the weight of her carry-on bag, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach. At 6 months pregnant, standing for long periods had become a test of endurance. Her lower back throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, and her ankles felt swollen inside her sensible loafers. She wasn't dressed to impress today. She wore grey sweatpants, an oversized hoodie from the University of Virginia, and a scarf wrapped loosely around her neck. She looked like a tired mother-to-be, exhausted and invisible. That was exactly how she liked it. Nia stood in the priority boarding lane for Meridian Airlines Flight 404 to Los Angeles. She held her ticket tightly. Seat 2A, first class. It wasn't a luxury she paid for. It was a medical necessity, signed off by her bureau chief, due to her pregnancy, and the high-stakes nature of the debriefing awaiting her in LA. "Excuse me," a voice dripped with irritation from behind her. "The economy line is over there, sweetheart." Nia didn't turn around immediately. She took a breath, centering herself. She knew that tone. She had heard it 1,000 times in her career, usually right before she put handcuffs on someone. She turned slowly. Standing behind her was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a boardroom. He was tall, wearing a navy bespoke suit that cost more than most people's cars. A Patek Philippe watch glinted on his wrist, and he clutched a Toomey leather briefcase like it contained the nuclear codes. This was Preston Sterling. Nia didn't know his name yet, but she knew his type. He was talking loudly into a Bluetooth earpiece, not even looking at her, assuming his presence alone would make her move. "I'm in the right line," Nia said softly, her voice calm. Preston finally looked at her, his eyes scanning her casual clothes, her messy bun, and her brown skin. He sneered, a reflex of disgust that he didn't even try to hide. He tapped his earpiece to mute his call. "Listen," Preston said, stepping uncomfortably close, invading her personal space. "This is for first class and Diamond Medallion members. Group 1. The zoo boarding is back there with the rest of the herd. Don't make me call security to have you removed. I'm in a hurry." "So am I," Nia replied, turning back to the gate agent. "Unbelievable," Preston scoffed, loud enough for the people behind him, a young couple and an elderly man named Mr. Henderson, to hear. "Affirmative action boarding, I guess. They let anyone up front these days." Mr. Henderson, wearing a veteran's cap, frowned and leaned on his cane. "Leave the lady alone, son. She's got a ticket." Preston whipped around. "Nobody asked you, Grandpa, and she's certainly not a lady dressed like that." The gate agent, a harried woman named Brenda, waved Nia forward. She scanned Nia's pass. The machine beeped green. "Welcome aboard, Miss Brooks," Brenda said with a tired but polite smile. "Seat 2A." Nia nodded and walked down the jet bridge. Behind her, she heard the machine beep for Preston. "Finally," Preston muttered. "I need a drink before we even take off. The smell of poverty is lingering in the queue." Nia walked down the narrow tunnel, the sound of the rain intensifying. She hoped, briefly, that the man was seated in the back. But as she stepped onto the plane and settled into the wide leather seat of 2A, placing her small bag under the seat in front of her, she felt a shadow loom over the aisle. Preston Sterling stopped at row 2. He looked at his ticket. Seat 2B. He looked at the empty seat next to Nia. Then he looked at Nia. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," he groaned, rolling his eyes toward the ceiling. "Brenda! Attendant! We have a problem." The cabin was filling up, but the first-class section was quiet, a sanctuary of soft lighting and pre-flight champagne. That silence was shattered by Preston's voice. Brenda, the flight attendant, hurried over. She was a professional who had been flying for 20 years, but the look on her face betrayed a deep exhaustion. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Is there an issue with your seat?" "The issue," Preston said, pointing a manicured finger at Nia, "is that I paid $3,000 for a premium experience. I did not pay to sit next to this." Nia didn't look up. She had pulled a book from her bag, a dense paperback on forensic accounting, and was reading the same paragraph over and over. Her heart rate was steady. She was trained for high-pressure negotiations with domestic terrorists. A rude businessman was nothing. "Sir, that is Miss Brooks," Brenda said, her voice tightening. "She is a ticketed passenger in 2A. Please take your seat so we can close the doors." "I want her moved," Preston demanded, dropping his heavy briefcase into the overhead bin with a loud thud. He didn't care that it nearly hit Nia's head. "Move her to coach. Give her a voucher. I need space to work, and I don't want to listen to her. Whatever music she's going to blast." "I'm not listening to music," Nia said, finally looking up. Her eyes were dark and piercing. "And I'm not moving. I'm pregnant, and I booked this seat for the legroom. Sit down or get off the plane." The cabin went quiet. The other passengers, a tech CEO in 3A and the elderly Mr. Henderson in 1B, watched intently. Preston's face turned a shade of crimson. He wasn't used to being told what to do, especially not by women who looked like Nia. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "Do you know who I am?" he hissed. "I'm Preston Sterling. I own Sterling Logistics. I could buy this airline and fire this flight attendant just for sport. You are a diversity hire sitting in a seat you can't afford. Now, be a good girl and go back to row 30 where you belong." Nia closed her book. "Mr. Sterling, I suggest you sit down. You are disturbing the peace." "Disturbing the peace?" Preston laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "I'm the victim here. I'm being forced to sit next to a glorified welfare queen." "Sir!" Brenda stepped between them. "That is enough. Take your seat or I will have the gate agent escort you off." Preston glared at Brenda, then back at Nia. He realized he was losing the audience. He scoffed, adjusted his tie, and aggressively shoved his way into seat 2B. As he did, he spread his legs wide, man-spreading so aggressively that his knee pressed hard against Nia's thigh. "Fine," he muttered, "but don't expect me to be polite." Nia shifted as close to the window as possible, protecting her stomach. "Just keep your hands and legs to yourself," she warned. "Or what?" Preston sneered, pulling out his laptop. "You'll call your baby daddy?" "Oh wait, he's probably in jail, right?" Nia bit her lip. The insult didn't hurt her feelings. She knew who the father was, a decorated Marine serving overseas. But the sheer ignorance of the man was testing her patience. She took a deep breath. Just 5 hours, she told herself. Just get to LA. The plane pushed back from the gate. The safety demonstration began. Preston spent the entire time loudly typing on his laptop, his elbow repeatedly jabbing Nia in the ribs. Each time she flinched, he didn't apologize. He just huffed, acting as if she were invading his space. As the plane taxied to the runway, the lights dimmed. Naya closed her eyes, trying to rest. She didn't know that the man sitting next to her was currently under investigation by the SEC for massive fraud. She didn't know that Preston Sterling was on edge because his empire was crumbling, and he was fleeing to LA to shred documents before a subpoena arrived. But she was about to find out exactly how desperate and dangerous he was. 20 minutes after takeoff, the seatbelt sign turned off. Nia unbuckled. The pressure on her bladder was intense, a common side effect of the third trimester. "Excuse me," Nia said politely. "I need to use the restroom." Preston didn't look up from his spreadsheet. He had ordered a double scotch the second the wheels were up, and the glass was already empty. "Hold it." "I can't hold it," Nia said. "Please let me out." Preston slammed his laptop shut. "You people are incapable of sitting still. It's always up and down, up and down." "Fine." He didn't stand up. In first class, there is enough room to slide past if the aisle person simply turns their legs. But Preston didn't turn his legs. He kept them planted firmly, blocking the path. "You'll have to squeeze," he said with a smirk, looking her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl. Nia sighed. She grabbed the headrest of the seat in front of her for balance and tried to step over his legs. It was awkward due to her belly. As she lifted her left foot to step over him, the plane hit a pocket of sudden turbulence. The aircraft jolted violently. Nia lost her balance. She stumbled, her hip bumping into Preston's shoulder. It was a minor contact, an accident caused by the weather. But Preston reacted as if he had been attacked. "Get off me!" he screamed. He lashed out. It wasn't a push, it was a kick. He drove the heel of his expensive loafer hard into Nia's shin, and as she buckled, he shoved her backward with both hands. "You clumsy cow!" Nia fell. She twisted in the air, desperately trying to protect her stomach. She landed hard in the aisle, her hip slamming against the metal track of the seat. A sharp cry of pain escaped her lips. "My baby!" she gasped, clutching her side. The cabin erupted. Mr. Henderson tried to stand up. "Hey, you can't do that!" Preston stood up, towering over Nia. He was drunk on scotch and rage. "She fell on me! Did you see that? She assaulted me!" He looked down at Nia, who was curled on the floor, wincing in pain. Her oversized purse had spilled open during the fall. The contents were scattered across the blue carpet of the aisle. A pack of gum, a bottle of prenatal vitamins, a phone, and a black leather wallet. The wallet had landed face down. "Get up!" Preston shouted, raising his foot again, threatening to kick her out of the way. "Get your trash off the floor and get out of my face." Nia looked up. The pain in her leg was sharp, but the fire in her eyes was colder than liquid nitrogen. She didn't look like a tired mother anymore. The mask was off. "Don't you move," Nia said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a command authority that froze the air in the cabin. "Excuse me?" Preston laughed, stepping forward. "I'll do whatever I—" Nia reached out and flipped the black leather wallet over. The gold badge caught the overhead reading light. It gleamed with terrifying clarity. Next to it was a photo ID that read, "Special Agent Nia Brooks, Federal Bureau of Investigation." Preston froze. His foot was still hovering inches from her, ready to kick her again. His eyes locked onto the badge. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like his blood had evaporated. "You," Preston stammered. "You're—" Nia grabbed the armrest and pulled herself up. She ignored the pain in her leg. She stood toe-to-toe with him. "Assaulting a federal officer," Nia stated, her voice echoing in the silent cabin. "Interfering with a flight crew. Committing an act of violence on an aircraft." She reached behind her back. She didn't have her service weapon. She was flying commercial. But she had zip ties in her bag. She always carried them. "Sit." down. For a moment, Preston Sterling thought about fighting. He was bigger than her. She was pregnant. But then he looked around. Every single passenger in first class was staring at him with pure hatred. Mr. Henderson was standing now, holding his cane like a baseball bat, ready to step in. The tech CEO in 3A was filming everything on his phone. Brenda, the flight attendant, was already on the interphone to the cockpit. "Captain!" Brenda's voice shook over the PA system, though she tried to keep it private. "We have a level 3 threat in the cabin. A passenger has been assaulted. A federal agent is on the scene." Preston collapsed into his seat, his arrogance deflating like a punctured tire. Look, I didn't know," he stammered, his hands shaking. "I thought you were just—" "Nobody." "That's the problem, Mr. Sterling," Naya said, leaning over him. She didn't yell. She was dangerously calm. "You thought you could hurt me because you thought I was nobody. You thought my life mattered less than your legroom." She picked up her badge and clipped it to her hoodie. It changed her entire silhouette. She wasn't a passenger anymore. She was the law. "Turn around," she commanded. "Hands behind your back." "You can't arrest me here," Preston squeaked. "We're in the air. I have rights. I have a lawyer. Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Naya said, tightening the heavy-duty plastic zip ties around his wrists. "Preston Sterling, CEO of Sterling Logistics, and based on the smell of your breath and your behavior, I'm adding public intoxication to the list." She shoved him back into his seat and buckled the seatbelt over him, locking him in place. "Brenda," Naya called out. "Yes, Agent Brooks." Brenda appeared instantly, looking at Nia with awe. "I need you to inform the captain that the situation is contained, but I need law enforcement waiting at the gate in Los Angeles, airport police, and the FBI field office. Tell them Agent Brooks has a suspect in custody for 18 U.S. Code, Section 113. "Right away," Brenda said. Naya sat down in seat 2C, the aisle seat across from him. She refused to sit next to him again. She winced, rubbing her shin where a dark bruise was already forming. "You're going to regret this," Preston hissed, tears of rage and fear welling in his eyes. "I'll sue you. I'll sue the FBI. My lawyers will destroy you. I have friends in the Senate." Naya pulled out her phone. She wasn't supposed to use it, but she connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi. She opened an encrypted messaging app. "Mr. Sterling," Naya said, not looking up from her screen. "You just kicked a federal agent who specializes in white-collar financial crimes. Did you really think I was flying to LA for a vacation?" Preston went still. "What?" Nia looked at him, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. "I wasn't following you, Preston. I was actually heading to LA to interview your former CFO about the shell companies you set up in the Caymans. But now that you've assaulted me?" She leaned in close. "Now I have probable cause to seize your laptop, the one you were so desperate to protect, the one sitting right there." Preston's eyes widened in horror. He lunged for the laptop bag, but the zip ties held him back. "No, you can't touch that. That's privileged." "Not anymore," Naya said. "It's evidence of a violent crime, and anything I find on it, well, that's just plain bad luck for you." She picked up the laptop bag and placed it under her own seat. For the remaining 4 hours of the flight, Preston Sterling didn't speak. He sat in his $3,000 seat, bound like a common criminal, watching the pregnant woman he had kicked calmly read a book, her foot resting on the laptop that contained all his darkest secrets. But the real pain hadn't even started yet. They were beginning their descent into Los Angeles, and the tarmac was going to be very, very crowded. The descent into Los Angeles International Airport was usually a beautiful sight. The sprawling grid of the city, the palm trees, the shimmer of the Pacific Ocean. For Preston Sterling, staring out the window of seat 2B. It looked like a prison grid. He had spent the last 4 hours in a state of manic oscillation. 1 minute he was hyperventilating, tugging fruitlessly at the plastic zip ties cutting into his wrists. The next, he was muttering to himself, convincing himself that this was all a misunderstanding that could be fixed with a checkbook. "I'll donate to the Policemen's Benevolent Association," he whispered to the window, his breath fogging the glass. "I'll buy the FBI a new gym. They can't arrest me. I'm Preston Sterling." Across the aisle, Nia Brooks sat in silence. She had declined the ice pack Brenda offered, preferring to stay alert. Her leg was throbbing with a deep, pulsating rhythm, but her adrenaline was keeping the pain at bay. She wasn't reading anymore. She was watching Preston. She saw the sweat beading on his forehead, the way his expensive suit was now rumpled and stained with spilled scotch. She saw a man unraveling. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, but it wasn't the usual cheerful landing announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We have been cleared for immediate landing. We ask that everyone remain seated with seatbelts fastened. Upon arrival at the gate, no one is to stand up until directed by law enforcement. Thank you for your cooperation." A ripple of murmurs went through the cabin. In 3A, Marcus, the tech CEO, turned his phone screen toward Nia. He mouthed the words, "It's already trending." Nia glanced at the screen. The video Marcus had recorded, of Preston screaming, kicking her, and then the badge flip, had been uploaded to Twitter. It had 2.4 million views in 3 hours. The hashtag Ross and First Class Felon was the #1 topic in the United States. Preston didn't know it yet, but his reputation was already dead. The plane taxied to gate 42B. The engines whined down. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged off, but nobody moved. The tension in the air was heavy enough to choke on. The cabin door opened. Normally, first-class passengers are the first to leave. Not today. 2 uniformed LAPD officers boarded first, followed immediately by 3 agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI. Leading them was Special Agent in Charge, SAC, David Rourke, the head of the LA field office. He was a bear of a man, 6'4" with a crew cut and a face carved from granite. He scanned the cabin and locked eyes with Nia. He saw the bruise forming on her shin and the exhaustion in her eyes. His jaw tightened. "Agent Brooks," Rourke said, his voice deep and commanding. "Status?" "Suspect secured, sir," Nia said, unbuckling her belt and standing up slowly. She winced, favoring her left leg. "Subject is Preston Sterling. Charges are assault on a federal officer, interference with flight crew, and I have probable cause to believe his laptop contains evidence of wire fraud and money laundering." Rourke nodded. He turned his gaze to Preston. It was a look of pure predatory focus. "Preston Sterling?" Rourke asked. "Finally!" Preston shouted, trying to stand up but stumbling because of the zip ties. "Officer, thank God! This woman is crazy! She assaulted me! She stole my property! I want her arrested immediately. I demand to speak to my lawyer, Arthur Vane." "Do you know Arthur Vane? He plays golf with the mayor." Rourke didn't even blink. He stepped forward, grabbed Preston by the bicep, and hauled him into the aisle. "Preston Sterling, you are under arrest for violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 111. You have the right to remain silent." "You're making a mistake!" Preston screamed as the LAPD officers swapped the plastic zip ties for steel handcuffs. The metal clicked shut with a sound of finality. "I'm worth $4 billion. You can't do this to me." "I don't care what you're worth," Rourke growled, shoving Preston toward the door. "You touched one of mine." As they marched Preston out of the plane, the passengers in first class began to clap. It started with Mr. Henderson, the veteran, slowly clapping his hands. Then Marcus joined in. Then Brenda, Soon the entire cabin was applauding. Preston looked around, wild-eyed. "Shut up, all of you! You're all jealous peasants!" They dragged him onto the jet bridge. But the nightmare wasn't over. As they emerged into the terminal, Preston stopped dead in his tracks. Neuer had called ahead, but she hadn't called the press. Marcus had. A wall of cameras and flashing lights awaited them. Reporters shouted questions over the din. "Mr. Sterling, did you kick a pregnant woman? Is it true your company is bankrupt? Preston, look this way." Preston tried to duck his head, to hide his face, but it was too late. The image of Preston Sterling, disheveled, handcuffed, looking terrified, was broadcast live to the world. Nia walked out behind him, flanked by 2 agents. She didn't look at the cameras. She kept her head high, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. Rourke leaned into her. "Medics are waiting in the private lounge, Nia. We need to get you checked out." "I'm fine, David," Nia said, though her voice was tight. "I need to be in the interrogation room. He has the encryption key to that laptop. I need it before his lawyer shuts him up." "Nia, you're injured. You're pregnant. Go to the hospital." Nia looked at Rourke. "David, he talked about shredding things. He was running. That laptop is the smoking gun for the entire Ryko case we've been building for 2 years. If I don't get that password now, we lose everything." Rourke sighed. He knew he couldn't stop her. "Fine. You have 1 hour before Arthur Vane gets a court order to stop us. Make it count." The interrogation room at the Wilshire Federal Building was not designed for comfort. It was a windowless cube of acoustic tile and cinder block, painted a color that could best be described as institutional despair. The air conditioning was cranked down to a shivering 60 degrees, a tactical choice designed to keep suspects uncomfortable and awake. Preston Sterling sat at the metal table, shivering in his $3,000 bespoke suit. The adrenaline from the flight had worn off, leaving behind a crushing hangover and a rising tide of panic. His wrists, raw and red from the zip ties, were now shackled to a steel loop bolted to the floor. He wasn't used to silence. In his world, silence was something he paid people to fill. Here, the silence was heavy. It pressed against his eardrums, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent light overhead, which buzzed like a dying insect. "I want water!" Preston shouted at the 2-way mirror, his voice cracking. "I want sparkling water with lime, and I want my lawyer! Do you hear me? I am Preston Sterling." The door didn't open. Nobody answered. He was screaming into the void. 20 minutes passed, then 40. Preston began to pace as much as the chain allowed, his Italian loafers clicking nervously against the linoleum. He was running through his mental Rolodex of favors. The mayor owed him. The senator owed him. Surely a phone call was being made right now. Surely the door would fly open and the police chief would apologize, and he would be whisked away to a private lounge. The lock finally tumbled with a heavy mechanical clack. Preston spun around, a smirk of relief forming on his face. "About time, you incompetent." The words died in his throat. It wasn't the police chief. It was Nia Brooks. She had changed out of her travel clothes. She now wore a sharp, dark blazer over a white shirt, her FBI badge clipped prominently to her belt. Her left leg was wrapped in a compression bandage, and she walked with a noticeable limp, favoring the shin he had kicked. But her posture was upright, her expression unreadable. She didn't come in alone. She carried a thick manila folder in one hand and his silver MacBook Pro in the other. She set the laptop down on the table gently, almost reverently, then pulled out the metal chair opposite him. She sat down. She didn't speak. She just stared at him. "Where is Arthur?" Preston demanded, though he shrank back slightly under her gaze. "Arthur Vane, my counsel. He should be here." "Mr. Vane is currently downstairs passing through security," Naya said, her voice calm, devoid of the anger he expected. "It takes a long time to get through our metal detectors with a briefcase full of lies. He'll be up shortly." "Then I'm not saying a word." "You don't have to," Nia replied. She opened the manila folder. "I just thought you might want a market update. You're a finance guy, right? You care about the numbers." She slid a piece of paper across the cold metal table. Preston looked down. It was a printout from a Bloomberg terminal. It showed the stock ticker for Sterling Logistics, STLG. The line on the graph looked like a cliff face. It plummeted straight down. What is this?" Preston whispered. "That is the Sterling effect," Naya explained coolly. "At 10 a.m., your stock was trading at $142. At 11:30 a.m., the video of you assaulting a pregnant woman hit Twitter. By noon, it was trending globally. By 1 p.m., when the live stream of your arrest aired, the NYSE triggered a circuit breaker to halt trading. Your stock is currently sitting at $14.50. Preston felt the blood drain from his face. That's a fluctuation. It will bounce back." "It won't," Naya said, sliding a second document across. "Because 20 minutes ago, the board of directors of Sterling Logistics held an emergency vote via Zoom. They voted unanimously to terminate you as CEO, effective immediately. They cited a moral turpitude clause in your contract. You're out, Preston. You don't have a company. You don't have a job." Preston stared at the paper, his hands shaking so hard he couldn't pick it up. "They can't do that. I am the company. I built it from nothing." "You built it on fraud," Naya said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Which brings us to the laptop." She tapped the silver lid of the computer. "You were desperate to protect this on the plane. You were terrified I would touch it." "Why?" Preston's eyes darted to the computer. "It contains privileged intellectual property." "I think it contains the ledger," Naya said. "I think it contains the records of the shell companies you set up in the Cayman Islands and Panama. I think it proves that you've been cooking the books for 5 years to inflate that stock price." She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Here is the situation, Preston. You are looking at 10 years for the assault. Minimum. But if you give me the password, right now, before your lawyer walks in, I can tell the U.S. attorney that you cooperated on the fraud charges. We can cut a deal. Maybe you do 15 years instead of 30. Preston looked at the laptop. He looked at Naya. He was breaking. He was a bully who had been punched in the nose, and he was looking for a way out. Preston stammered. "If I give you the password, you promise?" "I promise I will convey your cooperation," Naya said. Preston reached for the laptop. Bang! The door flew open. "Don't say a word!" Arthur Vane burst into the room. He looked like a caricature of a high-powered defense attorney, slicked back hair, a $3,000 suit, and a face red with exertion. He slammed his briefcase onto the table. "Agent Brooks!" Vane shouted, pointing an accusatory finger. "This interview is terminated. You are violating my client's Sixth Amendment rights. You are coercing a confession from a man under duress. I will have your badge for this." Preston let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Arthur, thank God. Tell her who I am." Vane turned to Preston, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Don't worry, Preston. I've already called Judge Benson. We're arguing that the arrest was unlawful. We'll have you out on bail in an hour. We'll sue the airline. We'll sue the bureau." Naya didn't move. She didn't flinch at Vane's shouting. She just leaned back in her chair and smiled. It was a small, terrifying smile. "Hello, Arthur," she said pleasantly. "You made good time from Century City." "We are leaving," Vane announced, reaching for Preston's arm. "Officer, unchain my client." "I'm afraid he can't leave, Arthur," a deep voice rumbled from the doorway. Special Agent in Charge, David Rourke, stepped into the room. He was a massive man, filling the doorframe. He held a stack of documents in his hand. "And neither can you, just yet," Rourke added. Vane bristled. "Excuse me? Am I being detained?" "No," Rourke said, walking over to the table. "But you might want to see this before you attach your name to this case." Rourke threw the documents onto the table. They fanned out, revealing bank transfer logs, satellite photos of warehouses, and Interpol red notices. "While you were in the air, Preston," Rourke said, addressing the prisoner, "our forensic accountants didn't just look at your stock price. We looked at the wire transfers you made last week. You see, when you assaulted a federal agent, it gave us probable cause to look at everything." Rourke pointed to a highlighted name on a bank statement, El Patron Logistics, Sinaloa. "We know about the cartel, Preston," Naya said softly. The room went dead silent. The air conditioning seemed to stop humming. "What?" Arthur Vane whispered. He looked at his client. "Preston. What is she talking about?" Preston was hyperventilating. It's just shipping. I just ship crates. I don't know what's inside them. It's not my fault." "You were laundering money for the Sinaloa cartel," Naya said, her voice hard as steel. "You were using your logistics network to move precursor chemicals for fentanyl into the United States and moving cash out. That's not fraud, Preston. That's racketeering. That's international drug trafficking. That's material support for terrorism." Naya looked at Arthur Vane. "That carries a mandatory life sentence. No bail, no parole." Arthur Vane looked at the documents. He saw the undeniable proof. He looked at Preston, who was sweating profusely, looking guilty as sin. Arthur Vane did the math. He thought about his reputation. He thought about his firm. He thought about the fact that defending a cartel launderer would end his career. Slowly, deliberately, Arthur Vane picked up his briefcase. "Arthur!" Preston squeaked. "Arthur, what are you doing?" "I represent Mr. Sterling in civil corporate matters," Vane said to Naya, his voice devoid of emotion. "I am not a criminal defense attorney for capital crimes involving narcotics. I lack the clearance." "Arthur!" Preston screamed, rattling his chains. "You can't leave me. I pay you millions." "Your assets are frozen, Preston," Vane said coldly. "You can't pay me anything." Vane turned his back on his client and walked out of the door without looking back. Preston watched him go, his mouth hanging open. The reality crashed down on him. He was alone, he was broke, and he was buried. Naya stood up. She picked up the laptop. "You know, Preston," she said, "I asked for the password to see if you had any decency left, to see if you'd take responsibility." She tucked the laptop under her arm. "But with a terrorism and narcotics warrant, we don't need your permission. Our cyber division can legally brute force this machine. We'll have it open in 20 minutes. She walked to the door, stopping just before she left. She looked back at the man who had kicked her, the man who had sneered at her poverty, the man who thought he was a king. He was weeping openly now, his face pressed against the cold metal table. "Enjoy the silence, Mr. Sterling," Naya said. "You're going to have a lot of it." She closed the heavy steel door, the lock engaged with a final, thunderous thud. The United States District Court for the Central District of California was more than just a building. It was a fortress of stone and judgment. For 6 months, the world had waited for United States Vifias Preston Sterling. It had become more than a trial. It was a cultural referendum on wealth, privilege, and the arrogance of power. Inside courtroom 402, the air conditioning was humming, but the atmosphere was suffocatingly hot with tension. The gallery was packed, shoulder to shoulder. Reporters from every major network sat in the front row with sketch pads, capturing the fall of an American titan. Preston Sterling sat at the defense table. The transformation was shocking. Gone were the Italian silk suits and the manicured confidence. He wore a charcoal suit that fit poorly, purchased off the rack by his court-appointed legal team because his assets had been frozen. His skin was sallow, his eyes rimmed with red. He looked like a man who hadn't slept since the day the zip ties clicked shut at LAX, but he still had a flicker of hope. His new lawyer, a frantic man named Elias Thorne, had promised him that the jury wouldn't convict on the terrorism charges. "They'll get you for assault," Thorne had whispered, "but we can beat the RICO case. We can save the money." That hope was about to be extinguished. The trial had dragged on for 3 grueling weeks. The prosecution, led by a shark-like U.S. attorney named Sarah Jenkins, had methodically peeled back the layers of Preston's life. They showed the jury the video of the kick in slow motion. They played the audio of his racist tirade. But today was the kill shot. "The prosecution calls its final witness," Jenkins announced, her voice echoing off the mahogany walls. "Special Agent Nia Brooks." A hush fell over the room. The heavy oak doors opened and Nia walked in. She looked radiant. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She wore a cream-colored blouse and black slacks, walking with a strength that commanded respect. She didn't limp anymore. The bruise on her leg had healed, but the memory of the insult clearly remained. She took the stand. She swore the oath. "Agent Brooks," Jenkins began, "can you tell the jury what went through your mind when the defendant kicked you?" Nia looked directly at Preston. He tried to stare her down, to use his old intimidation tactics, but he found he couldn't hold her gaze. He looked away. "I didn't think about myself," Nia said, her voice clear and steady. "I thought about my unborn daughter. I thought about the fact that this man looked at a pregnant woman and didn't see a human being. He saw an inconvenience. He saw an obstacle to his legroom, and I realized that if he would do that to me in public, on a plane full of witnesses, what was he capable of doing in private where no one was watching? And what did your investigation reveal he was doing in private?" Jenkins asked. Nia turned to the jury. "We found that the inconvenience of laws didn't apply to Mr. Sterling either. The laptop I seized from him contained communication logs with the Sinaloa cartel. Mr. Sterling wasn't just shipping logistics. He was shipping precursor chemicals for fentanyl. He was poisoning communities to fund his private jet." The jury gasped. A juror in the back row, a school teacher, looked at Preston with pure revulsion. "He kicked me," Nia finished, "because he thought he was untouchable. He thought his money was a shield. But that kick knocked the shield away." When Elias Thorne stood up to cross-examine Nia, it was pathetic. "Agent Brooks," Thorne stammered, "isn't it true that you provoked Mr. Sterling by invading his personal space?" Nia raised an eyebrow. "I was walking to the restroom, Mr. Thorne. Unless existing in the aisle of an airplane is a provocation, then no." "But surely you could have moved faster?" "I was 6 months pregnant," Nia said dryly. "No further questions," Thorne mumbled, sitting down. He knew he had lost. Preston grabbed his lawyer's arm. "Do something," he hissed, loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "I'm paying you. Well, I will pay you. Fix this." "Shut up, Preston," Thorne whispered back, defeated. "It's over." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman, a mechanic with grease-stained hands, didn't look at the defense table. "Will the defendant please rise?" Judge Harrison commanded. Preston stood up. His knees were shaking so violently, the table vibrated. On count 1, assault on a federal officer, guilty. On count 2, interference with flight crew, guilty. On count 3 through 20, wire fraud, guilty. On count 30, money laundering, guilty. The word guilty rang out 34 times. Each time, it was like a physical blow to Preston's body. He slumped further and further until he was practically hanging off the table. The sentencing hearing took place immediately. Judge Harrison, a woman who had served on the bench for 25 years, adjusted her glasses. She looked down at Preston, not with anger, but with profound disappointment. "Mr. Sterling," the judge began, "in my courtroom, I have seen murderers, thieves, and gang leaders. But I rarely see someone who had every advantage in life, wealth, education, opportunity, and chose to be so morally bankrupt." She picked up a document. "You asked for leniency. You cited your contributions to the economy. Let's discuss those contributions. The court orders the immediate seizure of all assets held by Sterling Logistics, the Sterling Family Trust, and your personal offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. This totals approximately $4.2 billion. Preston shrieked, "You can't take it all. That's my money." "It is blood money," Judge Harrison snapped, "and it is gone. The entirety of your estate will be liquidated. The proceeds will be divided between the Federal Victims Fund and a new grant for addiction recovery centers in the cities your chemicals destroyed." She leaned forward. "Furthermore, you are sentenced to 25 years in federal custody, but I am making a special recommendation to the Bureau of Prisons." The courtroom went silent. "You are not to be housed in a minimum security camp," the judge declared. "You treated people like cattle. You believed you were royalty. Therefore, you will serve your time at ADX Florence, the Supermax facility. You will be in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day. You wanted first-class privacy. You wanted to be away from the herd. You got it. You will not see another human being for a very long time." Preston's legs gave out. He collapsed into his chair, sobbing. "No, please, I can't be alone. I'll die." "Take him away," Judge Harrison ordered. The marshals didn't be gentle. They hauled Preston up by his armpits. As they dragged him out of the courtroom, he passed the gallery. He saw his former friends, his business partners, people he had invited to his yacht parties. They all looked away. Then he saw Naya. She was sitting in the front row, holding her baby. She stood up. Preston stopped struggling. He stared at her. He stared at the badge clipped to her belt. "I'm sorry," he blubbered, snot running down his face. "Agent Brooks, I'm sorry. Please tell them to stop." Nia looked him in the eye. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. There was no triumph in her face, only a calm, icy resolution. "You aren't sorry you did it, Preston," she said, her voice cutting through his wails. "You're just sorry you did it to me." The marshals shoved him through the side door. The heavy steel door slammed shut with a resounding clang that echoed like a gunshot. 3 weeks later, ADX Florence was a concrete tomb in the Colorado desert. It was silent. Preston Sterling sat on a concrete slab that served as his bed. The cell was 7 feet by 12 feet. There was a steel toilet, a steel sink, and a 4-inch wide window that looked out at a brick wall. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. His name was gone. He was inmate 984402. It was lunchtime. The slot in the heavy steel door slid open. A tray was shoved through. Preston walked over. The food was a grey, unrecognizable mash. "Excuse me," Preston shouted at the door, his voice cracking. "Officer, there's been a mistake. I have dietary restrictions. I need gluten-free. I need bottled water." "Shut it, 9844, a voice barked from the other side. Eat it or starve." Preston slid down the wall, clutching the tray. He thought about the menu on Meridian Airlines Flight 404. He remembered the warm nuts, the champagne, the filet mignon he had been about to order before he decided to kick the woman in 2A. He began to weep. He cried for the suit he would never wear again. He cried for the respect he had demanded and lost. He cried because he finally understood the true meaning of poverty. He was the poorest man in the world. Thousands of miles away, in a sunlit park in Virginia, the air was filled with laughter. Nia Brooks sat on a picnic blanket. The grass was green, the sky was a brilliant blue, the kind of day that made you glad to be alive. Next to her sat her husband, Marcus, a tall, broad-shouldered man who had returned from his deployment just in time for the birth. He was holding little Maya, tossing her gently in the air, making her giggle. Nia watched them, a content smile on her face. Her phone buzzed on the blanket. She picked it up. It was a text from SAC Rourke. News update. The auction of Sterling's estate just closed. The proceeds fully funded the new rehab center in downtown LA. They're calling it the Brooks Center, whether you like it or not. Nia chuckled. She typed back. "Tell them to name it after the victims. I was just doing my job." She put the phone down. "Good news?" Marcus asked, handing the baby back to her. "The best," Nia said. She cradled Maya, smelling the sweet scent of baby lotion and fresh air. She looked down at her daughter's tiny legs, kicking happily in the sunlight. She remembered the violence of Preston's kick. It felt like a bad dream now, a ghost story. "You know," Marcus said softly, looking at her, "you could have retired after the settlement. The Bureau offered you a desk job. Safer." Nia looked up at the sky. A plane was flying overhead, leaving a white contrail against the blue. "I know," Nia said. She reached into her bag and pulled out her wallet. She flipped it open, the gold badge glinting in the sun. "But there are a lot of people like Preston Sterling out there. People who think the world belongs to them. People who think they can hurt the quiet ones, the tired ones, the ones standing in the back of the line." She snapped the wallet shut with a definitive click. "Someone has to remind them that they're wrong," she said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Someone has to be there to drop the badge." Marcus smiled and put his arm around her. "That's my girl." The wind blew gently through the trees. Nia closed her eyes, listening to the peace she had fought for, and the peace she had won. The nightmare in seat 2B was over. The flight was finished, and for Nia Brooks, the landing was perfect. And that is the end of Preston Sterling, from a private jet to a concrete box, all because he couldn't control his ego. It's a brutal lesson, but a necessary one. When you try to crush others to make yourself feel tall, you usually end up smaller than you ever imagined. Nia Brooks didn't just win a court case. She proved that dignity is a force of nature. I want to know what you guys think about the judge's sentence. Was 25 years in Supermax too harsh, or was it exactly what he deserved for poisoning the community and assaulting an officer? Let me know in the comments section. I'll be hearting the best answers. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of justice, please click that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We have a new story coming next week about a Karen who tries to steal a veteran service dog. You do not want to miss the instant karma on that one. Thanks for watching. Stay humble, and remember, be careful who you kick on the way up, because you might meet them on the way down.